ഞങ്ങളുടെ പ്രൊഫഷണൽ ലൈഫിന് വലിയൊരു അനുഗ്രഹമായി തീരുവാൻ, വരുന്ന തലമുറയ്ക്ക് അനുഗ്രഹമായി തീരുവാൻ, ദേശത്തിന് അനുഗ്രഹമായി തീരുവാൻ സഹായിക്കണമെന്ന് പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കുന്നു. പ്രാർത്ഥനയുടനായി നന്ദി. ഞങ്ങളുടെ കർത്താവും ഞങ്ങളുടെ രക്ഷിതാവുമായ യേശുക്രിസ്തുവിൻ്റെ വിലയേറിയ നാമത്തിൽ തന്നെ ആമേൻ. പ്ലീസ് ബി സീറ്റഡ്.
Morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this exciting session of our Quest series. We're truly honored to have with us today an esteemed patent agent with rich experience in the healthcare and pharmaceutical sectors, Dr. G Rathish. Dr. Rathish currently serves as Assistant Professor at the Inter-University Center for IPR Studies, CUSAT, and is a registered Indian patent agent. He is also a guest faculty at IIT Hyderabad and plays a vital role in facilitating patent filings and IPR sensitization across academic and research platforms. Holding a PhD in chemistry, his research has contributed significantly to cancer drug discovery, with one of his compounds reaching advanced testing stages at the National Cancer Institute, US. He is the coordinator of the IPR facilitation cell at IUI CIPRS and serves on the expert committee for IPR under the Kerala State Biodiversity Board. Additionally, he supports startups through the Government of India's SIPP scheme and has drafted over 25 patent applications, including international filings. With rich experience in both academia and the pharmaceutical industry, Dr. Rathish brings a wealth of knowledge and insights to the session. Today, he will be sharing his thoughts on the relevance of patents in the healthcare domain. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Rathish. We welcome you, sir.
A warm good morning to all. So first of all, I would like to thank Believers Church Medical College Hospital for inviting me to share my knowledge in this particular forum. On this particular topic of patents, I know most of you would have heard about the term patents, but the nuances of patents are actually not restricted to one field of technology. So there are certain nuances which vary from one field of technology to another field of technology within patents. So I would be trying to cover these aspects, so give you a bird's eye view. So I start with a disclaimer that I may not be in a position to make you experts in one particular session, but my primary objective is to give you an overview to understanding what patents are primarily, and as we say, these are one form of intellectual property, and largely if you own a patent, you have certain rights, certain exclusive rights over your patented invention over there. And likewise, there are also boundaries which are created in terms of what can be protected under patents and what cannot be protected under patents over there. And even as a third party or as a user of a patented technology, you have certain rights over there. So this is what largely or broadly I'm going to cover in this particular session, with special focus on healthcare domain over there. This is the structure of my presentation. So it's divided into three parts. In part one, I'm just going to cover, I would put it in terms as the theoretical aspects of intellectual property in general and patents in specific over there. So giving you a brief introduction on what patents are, why you should file patents, and what are the limitations in terms of what can be patented and what cannot be patented, and also in terms of what the rights are of a particular patent owner, and what are the exceptions or limitations to those rights, because patents don't confer you an absolute right over there. So there are certain limitations. Then I move on to the patentability requirements. So one of the things that you must understand is that patents are not automatically granted. So it's similar to an academic program or an academic course wherein you have to meet a certain criteria, or to put it in certain terms, that you have to have a minimum stipulated credits to pass a particular course. So it's no different in the case of patents. So once you file a patent application, you are not deemed to be an owner of the patent. So it's an examination process. As we say, for each course paper you have a minimum criteria or minimum passing mark. So it's the case with patents. Only if you pass, you get minimum marks that a patent is awarded as a certificate to you. So largely, yes, patent is a certificate. It confers you an exclusivity for a certain period of time. So we look at what those requirements are, or what those criteria are, and these are cumulative requirements. So what it means is, as I said, analogous to your academic course. So if you have 10 course papers, you have to clear all the 10 course papers or secure a minimum grade over them. Right? So similarly, if you have to secure a patent, all these legal requirements must be met, which have been defined in the law. My particular focus is going to be on the Indian patent law. So there are certain differences between how these standards are applied in different countries. So these may vary from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. One, in terms of the standards. Second, in terms of how these standards are applied to the patent law in those countries. And also, patent rights are territorial. We'll be covering that in the forthcoming slides over there. And in the second part, I intend to cover how you can apply these standards over there, taking some of these examples. I would expect this to be more of an interactive session rather than being a monologue. So I may prompt with some questions. I know it's not very good to ask questions to doctors over there, but still I would expect all of you to kindly participate in this particular exercise over there. And second, I'll also quickly touch upon the patent filing process in terms of what is the timelines that you need to follow when you're filing a patent. For example, when should you file a patent, and what are the different options or strategies that you can follow when you're filing a patent. So as I mentioned earlier, patent rights are territorial, so are the patent filing process. So you don't have something known as an international patent. So what it means is you can't file a single patent which confers you exclusivity in all the member countries of that particular system, right? So you have to go and file a patent application in each of these member countries. Even though you have something known as an international filing mechanism or an international patent application process, which is also called as a PCT, which is an acronym for Patent Cooperation Treaty. But it's only a filing mechanism, it's a centralized filing mechanism. It does not confer any grant. That means it does not have an authority to grant an international patent which is valid across the globe, right? So that's one of the limitations. So what it means is you have to file a patent application in all the member countries where you would like to protect your invention. In terms of territoriality, what it means, if a patent is granted in India, you only have an exclusive rights in India. Or if a patent is granted in US, the patent owner has exclusive rights only in the territory of US. So you can't enforce your rights in India if there is no corresponding patent. So we'll be covering the filing in India, filing in foreign countries, and the statutory fees. That means when you're filing a patent application, you have to pay certain fees to the patent office. So that's known as your statutory fees or patent filing fees. And then you also have the professional fees, which are normally charged by the patent attorneys or the law firms over there. And one of the key questions is, what's the cost that is involved when you're filing a patent, and how much time does it take for a patent to be granted? So that's one of the common questions that I come across. I thought I'll cover that as well. And moving on to the do's and don'ts. So if you intend to file a patent application, there are certain activities that you must do, as well as there are certain activities that you must refrain from doing. For example, you must not disclose your invention to the public before filing a patent application, because then it falls in the public domain and you lose novelty. So novelty is one of the key criteria for granting a patent. So if your invention lacks novelty, a patent would be denied by the patent office over there. And in the third part, I am just going to quickly cover out the resources for conducting a patentability search. So this is unique because one of the limitations that you normally face when you are doing a literature search is that most of these databases are normally subscription based. That means you have to pay a subscription to access these journal articles over there. So this is actually an alternative that you can look at, even though a patentability search also using patent office databases also has got some limitations over there, but I'll try to cover these aspects over there. And finally, I conclude this with IPR in collaborative research. So if you are involved, so how do you protect your interest when you are trying to collaborate with a third-party institution, or if you are, negotiating with a third-party institution? So what measures or precautions you must take over there? So, so if you have any questions, you are free to stop me or interrupt me, and you can ask me, or we can have the question answer session at that, whichever is convenient to you. So just to give a brief introduction on intellectual property. So as the term is self-explanatory, that means you have one intellect. So we are talking about human mind over there. Human mind can develop innovations, can create various categories of work. For example, if you are an artist, you may be good at drawing. If you are a music director, you'll be good at music composition. So all those are considered to be creations of human mind over there, even though the aspects of music and artwork are not covered under copyright, but are not covered under patent, but we have a separate law which governs the protection of such work, the Indian Copyright Act of 1957. But that's also just one of the facets of intellectual property over there. And as we said, property has got a nature that when something is classified as a property, you need to have an owner for that. So when you own such a property, you also have an exclusive rights over that. So that's also one of the facets of intellectual property. Now, how does it differentiate from a tangible property or a physical property like a land or a house? Is, whatever goes into creation of this particular intellectual property is largely intangible in nature, right? For example, your thoughts, your creativity, or whatever idea comes in your mind, all those are deemed to be intangible, although it may result into a tangible product. For example, if there are patents patents owned by Apple over certain iPhones over there, so what it means is that someone from the company, employee of Apple, has developed these innovations using his intellect, but then you can see, touch and feel iPhones over there. And these are protected by law. As I said, we have a separate law in India, the Patent Act 1970, which governs the protection of such subject matter. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the departures when you compare the traditional property with an intellectual property. So traditional property largely comes with a limited period of exclusivity. That's one of the objectives of intellectual property law, that you are disclosing your work to the public. In return, you're getting an exclusivity for a certain period of time. But yes, there are exceptions to even intellectual property can in terms of, let's say, trademark and geographical indications can be perpetual over there, right? For example, Coca-Cola is an example of a trademark. So the name as well as logo is protected. So any idea how old the brand of Coca-Cola is? Anybody? Pardon? Yeah, so there are no right or wrong answers, right? So please feel free to interact. 50 years? More? 100 years? Okay. Or more than that? So it's more than 150 years old now. So that means for such long period, Coca-Cola has actually been able to have an exclusivity. Because the question is exclusive, what does it mean is, can someone use the name of Coca-Cola for beverages and start selling it tomorrow without a license from Coca-Cola? Right? So that's not something that you can do. But when we say it's a temporary, what it means is, in the context of patents, after 20 years, anybody is free to use that particular invention because it falls in the public domain. So there is no longer any exclusivity that is associated with a patent. And so these are the two exceptions, trademarks and geographical indications, wherein you can have a perpetual right, subject to making timely payments over there, because every 10 years, trademark protection is initially granted for 10 years and it has to be renewed every 10 years. Likewise, geographical indication is also protected for 10 years. Geographical indications largely protect the name or tag of a particular product over there. I think Kerala has got so many, GI products. So it's commonly abbreviated as GI. So any idea or any GI that you can think of, which is probably very near to, I would say, which I would believe probably comes within this particular district. Arumala Kannadi, right? So Arumala Kannadi is an example. So wherein you know that this particular product, which is a metal mirror, is actually being given the name or tag of Arumala mirror over there, primarily because the raw materials that are being used for making this mirror, even though it's not glass, it's a metal mirror, reflects, imparts certain qualities of a mirror over there, wherein you can see the reflection of your, image in that particular mirror over there. So that's one of the examples, and GI is also a one form of intellectual property, but it is collectively owned. So there is no single owner, unlike patents or other forms of IP. So it cannot be owned by an entity. It cannot be owned by a legal entity, but it can be owned by, you could say, societies over there, or collective organizations, collective societies over there. And then you have authorized users who actually use these products. So it's under a license from the proprietor over there. So moving on to patents, as I mentioned earlier, patents are also one form of intellectual property. And second, so one of the natures of intellectual property is that each form of intellectual property protects a different category of the subject matter. So when you talk about patents largely protect inventions over there, and we have two categories of invention in the Indian context. So as I mentioned earlier, my focus would be on the Indian law over there. So one is the product patent, the other one is the process patent. So since our focus of topic is today in the healthcare domain, so can someone actually give me some examples, or maybe one example of any innovation that you think can be actually patented from the healthcare domain? So could be therapeutics, could be diagnostics, or anything that you think can be patented. Any equipment. Ma'am, can you be more specific in terms of what is it? Diagnostic equipment? Right. So those are fall within the category of medical devices. You have medical devices, you have diagnostics over there. Anything else? Drugs, right? Medicines, right? So that's actually one of the big, because pharmaceuticals is where you make the maximum profit over there. Right? So the big pharma companies, COVID vaccine is one example wherein Pfizer made close to $18 billion in 1 year by selling their vaccines across the globe. So that's the kind of money you can make if you have an exclusivity over a particular patented technology. And in healthcare domain, it can be profound over there. But those are just some of the, you could say, the advantages. But yes, there are also disadvantages in terms of patents. That's something that I'll be covering in my forthcoming slides over there. Right. So those are just some of the illustrations over there. But yes, there are limitations of certain methods of process that can be patented in the medical domain, in the healthcare domain, particularly in India. So I'll be also touching upon those aspects over there. As discussed earlier, patent rights are territorial. So what it means is if a patent is granted in India, you can only enforce your rights in India. That means if someone is making an unauthorized copy of your patented invention without your permission, you can only file a suit in India. If let's say that infringement action or the copy is being made outside India, let's say in US, but if you don't have a corresponding patent in the US, you can't approach the court of law and file an infringement suit. Infringement suit is nothing but if someone is violating your patent rights, you're approaching the court for a remedy over there. As I mentioned earlier, so most of these forms of IP come with a limited duration of protection. So in the context of patents, it is 20 years. So you have an exclusivity of 20 years for from the date of filing of your patent application. And after 20 years, you cannot renew the patent. By renewing timely, what it means is in the Indian context, for the first 2 years, there are no annuity or renewal fees. But after that, every year you have to pay the renewal fees. If you fail to pay the renewal fees also, the patent will actually lapse. So you may not have 20 years. So 20 years are there only if you're making timely payment of your renewal or annuity fees every year after the first 2 years, provided the patent is granted. Further, as I mentioned earlier, patents act as a market protection tool, because once you have a patent, no one else can manufacture the patent permission. And one of the key objectives of the patent law is also to promote disclosure, because you are getting an exclusivity for 20 years because primarily you are disclosing it to the public over there. Right? Even though you may not be in a position to use it commercially, but yes, definitely you can use it for certain other purposes. But one of the key objectives of the patent law is, we say it's an exchange. That means a quid pro quo, you're disclosing, in return you're getting protection from the government for a period of 20 years for your invention. And that's a reward that is conferred over there, the exclusivity period, wherein you and your licensees would be the only people who would be able to practice that particular patented invention commercially. These are just some of the illustrations. For example, in the category of healthcare, if it is therapeutics, it can be the active pharmaceutical ingredient, or it could be the pharmaceutical composition of such APIs. Prophylaxis could be vaccines and vaccine technologies. Medical devices, as Sir said, stents, insulin pumps, dental implants, prosthetics, diagnostic devices, X-ray machines, glucometer, diagnostic kits, COVID-19 diagnostic kit, AI-related healthcare patents. This is something that's rising. So one of my scholars is working in this area, looking at the patentability of AI-related inventions related to diagnostics over there. So we have observed that in India, patents are being granted for AI-related inventions, but it's a gray area, primarily because AI is considered to be a software element over there. So computer programs per se are not a patentable subject matter in India, but the functionality aspect of a particular software can definitely be patented. For example, one of the advertisements that I saw today morning when I was coming to this venue is that Believers Church is also offering these robotic knee replacements over there. So the question is, can you have a patent for that robot who is actually, carrying out this assisted surgery to replace the knee? So do you think that a patent can be granted to such robots? Design, in India we don't get a patent for design. In US definitely design is a subject matter of patent in India, but design does not protect the functionality of the product. It just protects the beauty or aesthetics of the product. Yeah, they may have a patent over the functionality of the product over there. So in terms of, functionality will be protected, but because we say it's a robot, so obviously there will be an underlying software which is actually making that particular robot functional over there. So that underlying software program, the source code and object code is not something that can be patented in India. So we have a separate regime, copyright regime, wherein you can get a protection for the software code over there. That means the source code or the object code. But yes, the functionality per se can be protected, provided it meets all the criteria of patents over there. In terms of process for preparing APIs, process for preparing pharmaceutical compositions, we'll also look at what the limitations are in the healthcare domain, particularly with regards to method patents or process patents in my forthcoming slides. So once a patent is granted in your name, you have certain rights, right? So because now you own that particular patent, could be a patented product or it could be a product which is obtained by a patented process. So when I talk about product and process, what it means is when you have a product patent, what it means is that you have an exclusive right over that particular product, let's say paracetamol, but you have a process patent. So the process patent is only conferring you exclusivity in the manner in which you are actually making that particular product, right? For example, you have a process to make paracetamol. Someone else comes up with a different process, so he'll still be deemed as non-infringement. That means you will not be violating the rights of the patented process over there. So process only protects the manner in which you are making that particular product. per se protects the product as such, irrespective of the process that you're using. So let's say there is one product patent and there are 100 ways of making that product. All these process will actually infringe that particular product patent. But in the context of a process patent, if there is one process patent and there are 99 other ways of making that particular product, the same product, you will not definitely infringe the process over there. So that's the difference in scope of the rights when you're talking about a product as well as a process over there. And when you define these claims, normally in process you're defining it by way of steps over there. So let's say if it's a two-step process, you disclose what those two steps are, and you are getting a protection only for the manner or the order in which you are carrying out that particular process. So the rights of a patentee confers you an exclusive right. We also call it as a negative right because it excludes others from making, using, selling, offering for sale, or importing a patented product or a product which is obtained by a patented process from India. Now on the right side are exceptions. So these you can also call as rights of the users in terms of, let's say, a third party who is using a patented invention without the permission of the patent owner. So in normal circumstances, if you're using a patented invention without the permission of the patent owner, it will be deemed as an infringement over there. So let's say if government tomorrow is importing medicines from outside India, patented medicines. I think one of the scenarios that we can relate to is the COVID scenario, right? So there was this medicine remdesivir. So it's basically a patented medicine in India. And that was one of the medicines that was prescribed for the treatment of COVID-19 over there. And if the government of India wanted to import that, they could do that without the permission and yes, definitely they cannot sell that, but definitely they can distribute these medicines to their channels over there. Likewise, if you're using a patented invention for the purpose of teaching or for the purpose of research, that means even if you have a patent, that may not be the most optimum solution. So people may still think that your patent is not solving all the problems. So you can use that particular patent, modify it, and then come up with a modified invention that if it meets all the requirement, you can still get a patent. So that means working on a patented invention for the purpose of research is not considered to be a violation of patent rights without the permission. All these activities you're doing is without the permission of the patent owner. Now, fulfilling regulatory requirements. So as you may be aware that if a drug or a medicine has to be approved, it must meet the 3 criteria of safety, quality and efficacy over there, right? And for that you have to generate data. So if you are making a generic drug, one, you have to manufacture this particular patented medicine that may be being done by a third party. And if let's say it's an API which is being manufactured by one company, third party, then they are selling it to another generic company over there. So there is a commercial sale happening over there. So in normal circumstances that will be deemed as a patent violation. But if you are using that for the purpose of submitting data to a regulatory agency, drug regulatory agency, let's say CDSCO or DCGI, that will not be deemed as a violation of patent right in India. And if you're legally importing patented articles from outside India, so let's say if you're importing 50,000 iPhones from outside India, by paying import duty over there, you're allowed to resale those products over there, right? So redistribution rights normally exhaust. It's also something known as a doctrine of exhaustion. That means on the physical product that you have purchased, right? So you're allowed to do that. Compulsory license. Now, this is actually a remedy within the patent law to prevent the abuse of monopoly by patent owners. I'm not sure if you have heard about, there is one compulsory license that was granted for an anti-cancer drug in India by name sorafenib. It was in 2013. The cost of that medicine during that period, 2011, was around 2,80,000 per patient per month. So that's not something that we can think of, that how many of us could afford that such cost, because primarily because it was patented. No one can actually manufacture a generic medicine until the patent expires over there. So in such a situation, a generic company first approached the patented company. They were not willing to grant a voluntary license. Then they approached the patent office. And one of the reasons was that the price was very high and it was not affordable. And based on that, a compulsory license was granted. And any idea at what price the generic company was willing to sell the patented medicine? less than 10,000. It was around 8,800. That means around 97% reduction in the prices at which the generic company was willing to sell. In fact, that was NATCO which was willing to sell, and Cipla was actually selling that generic medicine before issuance of compulsory license at around 16,000 per patient per month. But once the compulsory license was issued, they were selling it at somewhere around 6,000 over there. So compulsory license is basically a safeguard mechanism which can limit the abuse of monopoly by patent owners over there within the patent system. Now, why should you file patents? Right. So I said earlier that if you have an exclusivity, one of the examples that I gave is pharmaceutical industry. Why do they rely heavily on patents? Is primarily because they will get an exclusivity for 20 years. Right. So medicines, particularly if these are life-saving drugs, they always come at a price. Right. So not all patented medicines are costly, but yes, life-saving drugs are definitely costly. Right. So that's one of the things you can achieve. Market protection, as I said, you get an exclusivity for a period of 20 years. No one else can come into the market for a period of 20 years. Revenue generation. So you can use it as a source of revenue. So let me just ask a general question. So if you own a property, let's say maybe a second house or a second flat, so how can you generate revenue or money from that particular property? Rent it out, right? So renting is one way. And let's say if doctor wants to send his kid abroad for higher studies, so and if this is one of the instruments I can use, so what do you think you can do over there? Because renting out is not probably an option wherein you can finance. Pledging it collateral, so you can keep it as a collateral. And if it is let's say the fees are very high, is there any other option? Sell it out, right? So depending on renting, selling and pledging it. So it's no different when you talk about patents, but yes, one of the stark differences that you notice is that unlike physical property, patents may not have any value. So the studies that have been done largely, maybe I'll ask a question. So how many of you, or let's say, what is the percentage of patents that you think are commercialized? 10%, okay. 5%. Someone said 1%, right? Yeah, all of you are within that range. So yeah, it's around 10%. That means out of 100 patents, only 10 patents are actually commercialized or have a commercial value. Just because you have a patent, it cannot guarantee you commercial success, but it does provide a market protection over there. So that's what the study says. That means only 10 patents out of 100 are actually having a commercial value over there. And one example, if you look, let's say iPhone has got patents for their flagship iPhone models over there. So let's say you have a patent for iPhone 5 now. So do you think that it is having any commercial value in today's world? Because today I think we have 15 or 16. So does anyone use, even if it is given for free? If Apple starts giving iPhone 5 for free, do you think people will actually take that over there? Right. So technology is also one of the key factors, because in certain fields of technology, the life cycle is relatively very short for products over there. Right? iPhone is an example. So I think maybe over the last decade, there have been 15 models over there. So that means even within less than 1 year, the technology is changing. Right? So if there are patents protecting such technologies, they may become outdated. So there is no purpose of maintaining such patents over there, because maintenance is also one of the problems. Right? You have a baby elephant, it's fine, right? But when it gets old, then you know that if you are not able to generate any revenue from that, then it can definitely become a liability or a burden. Right? So revenue generation, yes. So assignment is equivalent to selling your property. So once you assign a patent, what it means is that you're transferring all your rights to a third party. Licensing is like renting out your property. You are still the owner, but then the property is enjoyed by the tenant to whom you are renting out your property. Third, as we discussed, mortgage. Now, this is an interesting concept because some of the developed countries actually use patent as a tool for mortgage over there. That means you can go to a bank or a financial agency and then you can pledge your patent, and in return you can get money for, let's say, commercializing your invention. So you're an entrepreneur, you don't have any physical property, you don't have anything to pledge. Patent itself can actually be one source wherein you can actually pledge and get money to, let's say, commercialize your venture over there. So Government of India is also noting this for quite some time now. So probably in near future, if you have a patent, you can go to a bank and say, please give me money because I want to commercialize my invention. So that can also be used as a collateral. As valuation, we have discussed some of these companies make more money by licensing out their portfolio. For example, IBM, they gain close to $1 billion, $1 billion USD every year by licensing out their patents over there. So one is economic value, the other one is definitely brand value, right? So I would say one of the reasons behind today's talk, I would say, is brand value, because even Believers College wants to start filing a lot of patents over there. Primarily because even in academic framework, that most of these ranking agencies now give a lot of value to patents. So if you have a patent and compare it with publication, probably patent can have an edge over there, right? So that's one of the things that in terms of these accreditation agencies which are looking into patents as one form of marker or parameter to evaluate institutions over there. Now risk, as I mentioned earlier, now there are so many academic institutes which file a lot of patents, but one of the problems is that they have realized, this is something that even happened with CSIR. CSIR is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the primary, you could say, the R&D body in India, which largely funds these research institutions. And they were filing patents left, right and center. And once you file a patent, if it is granted, you also have to maintain the patent. So one, you have to spend money to acquire a patent. Second, you also have to maintain those patents over there. And there was a study which said most of the patents, that means I think if I recall correctly, only around 2% of those patents were commercialized. So it was becoming a liability. That's when you realize that you have to also look at the commercial potential. Let's say when you're comparing this with a journal publication in most of the cases, you may not be spending your money unless you want to make it open access over there, right? If you want to convert it into open access, probably you may have to spend money. Otherwise, largely the inventors or the authors are not spending any money over there. Based on whatever research you're doing, yes, maybe for the research you may be spending some money, largely not for publication over there. But in the case of patents, you're spending money for research as well as you're spending money for acquiring those patents, as well as you have to maintain those patents over there. So if it does not have any financial value or a commercial value, then it can become a liability over there. So that's one of the limitations that you have. Second, unlike journal articles which are very specific, you can have broad subject matter in the context of patents. For example, if you have developed a process, you can also try to focus on having a broad having broad parameters over there rather than a very specific parameter. For example, if you are carrying out inoculation at a particular temperature, or it's a process over there, but then in the context of a patent, you can have a range over there, right? So that's what it means, that so that your competitors are not easily trying to bypass your patent over there. So that's one of the benefits of patent. And if you're keeping it very specific, your competitors can actually have a workaround strategy. That means they can develop an alternative without infringing your patent. Third is weak patents, as I mentioned earlier. So if you are trying to patent a subject matter which is not patentable, one, or which, let's say, you have already disclosed somewhere, so the possibility is that if the patent office is able to identify such disclosure, the patent will not be granted to you. So ultimately, that means you may have spent so much money on acquiring a patent, but as I said, you only have an exclusive rights once the patent is granted. Merely filing a patent does not entitle you any exclusive right over that particular invention. So if it is denied, it will fall in the public domain. Subject matter, as I mentioned, for example, patents are granted for inventions. So discoveries are not something that can be patented. But in the context of copyright or journal articles, if you have discovered, let's say, a new species, it could be a plant species, an animal species, or a microorganism species, you can definitely go for publication. But in the Indian context, you cannot go for patenting such microorganisms over there, because these are considered to be product of nature over there. So subject matter limitations are also there in the context of patents. And also, some of the questions that people ask is, can you actually get a patent for a musical composition? Definitely not. You can't get a patent for musical composition. We have a separate law which protects such subject matter. The Copyright Act protects such subject matter. Now moving on to the legal requirements of patentability. So these are the set of requirements, key requirements I would say. These are not the only requirements, which all of these requirements have to be fulfilled if a patent has to be granted to that particular applicant over there. So as mentioned earlier, it should not fall into any of these non-patentable subject matter like discovery. As you said, if it's a musical composition or if it's a business method. So I'll be covering this in one of my forthcoming slides, some of the few examples. So there is a laundry list over there. If you want, you can refer to section 3 of the Patent Act over there. Novelty. Novelty is also one of the key requirements. So when we evaluate novelty, what we are examining is whether the invention per se is disclosed anywhere in the world, right? So all the features. So if you're trying to patent a particular, robot over there, which can perform surgery. So the patent office will look whether all those features which are disclosed in that particular invention is already disclosed anywhere in the world. If that's the case, a patent will be denied. So it's basically if an exact copy of your invention is existing, let's say Xerox copy, then it is not novel. And this could be in terms of publication, could be in a journal article, could be in a patent document. Even YouTube videos can be considered as a disclosure. So patent office actually cites YouTube videos also these days. Second, disclosure also can be by way of a use. That means you have once you have developed a particular product or a technology, instead of filing a patent, you started to commercialize it, and subsequent to that, you filed a patent application. So that will be considered as a deemed as a disclosure because it is disclosed before the filing of a patent application. There was this one case of Nilkamal Plastics, so wherein this particular individual had developed a kilta. Kilta is nothing but a bag. Traditionally, it's a bamboo bag wherein you pluck the tea leaves and put it over there. Someone had developed a plastic version of that, and then he got a patent. But prior to seeking a patent, 2 or 3 years before that, he was actually marketing that product. So it was being sold in the market. And when Nilkamal Plastics also came up with a similar product, the inventor actually filed an infringement suit, and in defense, Nilkamal Plastics argued that this invention is not novel because it was already in the public domain. So something is already in the public domain, you cannot grant a patent for that because it was being sold in the market, and the patent was actually revoked over there. Inventive step. When you compare novelty and inventive step, so if there is a difference between your invention and what is disclosed, it is deemed to be a novel. The difference could be a minor difference, or it has to be a single difference over there, right? So when you are looking at inventive step looks at whether such difference which is existing between your invention and what is already disclosed, would it be obvious to a person skilled in the art? So how do you look at obviousness is in terms of whether there is a technical advancement or not. So if there is a technical advancement, then it will be non-obvious to a person skilled in the art. But if it is lacking a technical advancement, then it will be obvious, and if it is obvious, then it is not patentable. So person skilled in the art is basically a hypothetical person, so it depends on the field of technology. For example, in the context of, let's say, prosthetics, who do you think would be a person skilled in the art? Who can be considered as a person skilled in the art? Doctors? Or biomedical engineers? Right, so biomedical engineers will be considered as a person skilled in the art. So it depends on the field of technology over there. It's a hypothetical person because one, the patent office will have to put themselves in the shoe of a person skilled in the art and evaluate over there. Likewise, even in the court of law, the judge will have to put himself in the shoes of a person skilled in the art, and based on that do an analysis over there. So key difference between novelty and inventive step. Inventive step is always in terms of combining more than one literature. So we also call it as mosaicing. So mosaicing is what, if you look at a room, there are it's basically a combination of tiles. So when you are combining so many tiles, that's when you are getting a particular room. The question is, when you are combining so many documents, would it be obvious to a person skilled in the art? So inventive step largely is examined based on the combination of more than one document. Novelty is examined in terms of a single document. So that's the difference between novelty and inventive step. And since patents are considered to be an industrial property, so it's also necessary that you demonstrate industrial application. So it can be in terms of, let's say, your invention is reproducible in lab, but when you are scaling it up, probably you're not able to reproduce that invention, or probably you have discovered something, so it's a serendipity, but you're not able to reproduce that or repeat that, right? So you've done it once, but probably you did not note down all the parameters over there, and when you're trying to reproduce it for the second time or multiple times, you're not able to do that, right? So industrial application is also one of the requirements. And then sufficiency of disclosure. So if you recall, in one of my slides, earlier slides, I did mention that your patents are granted an exclusivity for 20 years primarily because you are disclosing your invention to the public. So what it means is, after 20 years, anybody should be free to use your invention. So what if you're not sufficiently disclosing your invention? You're keeping something, part of it as a trade secret. For example, you are claiming a product, but you're not disclosing the process on how to make that particular product. So one of the examples I always give is that of the dosa batter. So if I'm claiming a dosa batter, but I'm not disclosing how that dosa batter is made, the question is, after 20 years, would people be in a position to reproduce that particular invention, right? So assuming that it's been done for the first time. So that's also one of the key requirements. And also, if you have very broad disclosure, right, you're trying to claim everything under the sun. One of the things that normally you find in the case of biological products or biological drugs is that they have very broad claims. They're trying to claim these antibodies by function rather than by structure over there. So such claims have actually been denied over there in the patent. In US. So there are some of these cases in the US over there. So your disclosure should be confined to what you are claiming over there. It should not be very broad. That means you are only, let's say, manufacturing one particular product, but you are trying to claim anything under the sun over there. So let's say you're saying you are claiming an anti-diabetic agent. So what it means is every anti-diabetic agent will actually be covered in that, right? But you are only making one particular medicine in that, right? So that becomes very broad over there. So those things can actually be opposed, and that also can lead to revocation of your patent if it is granted, and can also be denied a patent. So section 3 and 4 is where you can look at all the details of the first criteria. I'll be also covering some of those illustrations which are relevant in the context of medical domain. So non-patentable subject matter, as mentioned earlier, is a laundry list. Public order or morality. So if there is a subject matter which affects public order or morality. So in the context of healthcare domain, one of the examples is that if your invention is related to stem cells over there, so if it is leading to the destruction of stem cells, since they are considered to be a unit of life over there, then in embryonic stem cells particularly, such subject matter are not normally considered patentable in India over there, right? So that's one of the things. And likewise, method of cloning of humans is also not something that can be patented in India. Inventions which cause serious prejudice to human, animal, or plant life. One of the examples is the Terminator technology that was developed over there. So you have these technologies, which probably do not reproduce over there, which is the normal nature of a particular plant life or animal life over there. Discovery, as I mentioned earlier, it could be of living things or could be of non-living things, because these are considered to be product of nature, and these are not exclusive to any particular individual, and these are free to all. Discovery of a new form of a known substance. So this is primarily employed more in the context of pharmaceuticals. So if you have developed a new, let's say, salt of paracetamol. So the question is, can you have a patent over a new salt of paracetamol? So it's a conditional exception. Yes, if you are able to show that the new salt of paracetamol has got enhanced efficacy, you can get a patent. But if you are unable to demonstrate enhanced efficacy of new salt of paracetamol, the patent would be denied. Mere admixture of substances. So if you're combining two medicines, and coming up with a combination which is not contributing to any synergism. Right? So you're combining paracetamol and aspirin. So if there is no synergism, then the patent will not be granted to a combination of such substances. Computer programs per se or algorithms, as I did mention earlier. So if you're trying to protect the software code over there, it's not considered to be a patentable subject matter, even though you can protect the functionality. Method of agriculture or horticulture. So if you have developed a process for producing mushrooms over there, that is not considered to be not producing, but rather let's say using certain tools for growing mushrooms, that is not considered to be a patentable subject matter in India. And this is what I was talking about. Even though we have seen that subject matter which can be patented in India, but the methods or process of medical treatment is also not something that can be patented in India. So we'll just cover some of these illustrations over there. And plants and animals other than microorganisms. So interestingly, plants and animals cannot be patented, but microorganisms can be patented. So do you think all microorganisms can be patented in India? Because this has to be read with the third bullet point, discovery of living or non-living thing. So that may be debatable. I don't know whether, can we consider microorganisms as living things? So there ends the debate. Yeah. So then the question is, you have to look at what kind of microorganisms can be patented. So if it's a discovered microorganism, it cannot be patented. If it's an invented microorganism, yes, it can be patented. So what's the difference between the two? Already existing. So genetically modified microorganisms are invented microorganisms because they're not existing in nature. But plants and animals, even if they are genetically modified, in the Indian context, they are not patentable. That's the difference. And this is just not the entire list which is excluded, but which seemed relevant to the medical domain. Possible ways of avoiding exclusions, yes, as I said, develop a genetically engineered microorganism. You can have culture media for developing for tissue culture, certain apparatus that you may have developed for tissue culture, diagnostic kit compositions, medical devices, novel dairy and horticultural products. So can you have a patent for milk? So is milk naturally available or naturally occurring? Yeah, fortified. So maybe let's say flavored milk. So is flavored milk patentable? Yeah, because cow doesn't give flavored milk, right? So yes, it's not naturally occurring. So you still have scope for such products over there if they are. So what you are comparing over there is whether it's occurring in nature or not. So that's basically the key factor. Plant-based agrochemicals, plants per se we can't use, you can't get a variety, protection for plant variety, but yes, you can use products which are derived out of that. But yes, it has to be in a different form, so you can't use it in that particular form. Maybe it's a combination of different, extracts of different plants over there. So that may, if it is demonstrating synergism, it can still be patented. And as I said, methods of agriculture are not patentable, but yes, agricultural machinery, implements and laboratory equipments are definitely a patentable subject matter. Now, this is just one of the criteria. So please understand, just because your subject matter meets this criteria, it is not necessary that a patent will be granted, because you also have to look at novelty, inventive step, right, industrial application. So all those criteria have to be cumulatively met. So can we just apply what we have? So moving on to the second part, we are moving on to the second part. How much time do we have now? 10 minutes? Okay, I'll try to wind up in 10 minutes, yeah. So is theory a patentable subject matter? Okay. A ma'am says yes, but anybody else who thinks otherwise? Says. So the question is, can you put all these theories into practice? Or are theories considered to be abstract in nature? Because not all theories, will result into a practical product. So theories are normally considered to be abstract, and abstract ideas are not patentable in India. Not just in India, but even US and Europe also, these are not considered to be patentable. Discovery? Yeah, so unanimously we could say. Yeah, maybe because this is also subject to the other conditions of patentability. New plant variety? No. Even if it is genetically modified, patent will not be given for plants or animal varieties. You have a separate law for plant variety protection by name Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights, where you can protect these new plant varieties. New animal variety? A new use of an existing medicine, that means paracetamol or aspirin initially was discovered for pain relieving, and now it's also prescribed as a cardiovascular drug. So do you think, is there any change in the structure of the aspirin when you're prescribing it for pain or for heart patients over there? No, right? So it's considered to be a discovery. So these things are specific to the Indian law. This could differ from one country to another country, right? Because in US, this is a patentable subject matter, new use of an existing medicine. Right? So depending on where you're filing a patent, these things will vary. Right? Even the novelty, inventive step, all those things are uniformly there in all the countries, but this is where it differs in terms of the non-patentable subject matter. New properties, so tomorrow you have identified a new physical or a chemical property of a substance, or maybe anything, or a microorganism. Is that a patentable subject matter? Right? It's still considered to be a discovery. Right? Method of diagnosis, is it a patentable subject matter in India? Okay. Method is not a patentable subject matter, right? That means process patents are not allowed in India. This one, that means a product. If you are pitching it as a product, yes, there is a possibility that you will get a patent over there. Software program, no, right? Functionality of a software program, yeah, because we have to also look at the other factors. New painting or a poem, so we have a separate law. Traditional knowledge, this is something that's unique to India. Pardon? GI, not necessarily. This could be traditional medicines over there. Yeah, so yes, so they are not patentable subject matter, right? So, but traditional knowledge, for example, if you are trying to claim a product which is using an ingredient which has got certain properties, maybe a toothpaste which is using clove over there. So toothpaste per se may be patentable even though it is using a clove, but the use of clove as such is not something that can be patented. So in the US, two of the Indian origin scientists had got a patent for the wound healing properties of turmeric, but then CSIR had approached the USPTO and got that patent revoked, saying that it is subject matter of a traditional knowledge in India. And this is, as I said, mentioned. So the rider for maybe is that other requirements also have to be met. So is this novel? So we are now talking about the novelty requirement. Previously we were just talking about the non-patentable subject matter. So your work is already published in a journal before filing of a patent application. So is your invention novel? What about conference? Conference, yes, we have got certain relaxations in terms of conference. What it says is, the law says that if within 12 months of your disclosure in a conference, if you're filing a patent, it will not be deemed as a disclosure. But then it depends whether, because it says considers conference to be a learned society. So whatever I am discussing today, if this stays within this room, I get the 1 year exclusivity. That I get the 1 year grace period. But let's say if this is published on internet, I may not be able to get that exclusivity, because it will then anybody can access that. Right? So that's a gray area. We don't have any case laws over there. Always we say here, right? In medical terms, prevention is better than cure. Right? Vaccination is better than therapeutics. So it's the same thing. Don't disclose before you file a patent application to be in a safer side. Better safe than sorry. Patent application. So this patent was already published in USA before a patent was filed in India. Okay, the answer is sorry, I missed out. My bad. The answer is already there. Yeah, and if the sale of a product, so all these things you are doing it before the filing. If you are doing it after the filing, then it does not have an impact. Even if your patent is granted after 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? Because the patent office will only look at disclosure which is present before the filing date of an application. So today, if you are filing a patent, anything that is there until yesterday will be deemed as a disclosure. And let's say even if your patent gets granted after 10 years, that will not be deemed as a disclosure over there. A display of a product in an exhibition. Yeah, so this also is similar to your publication and conference proceeding. Here also you have a grace period of 12 months. But the catch over here is that the law says that such exhibitions must actually be notified in the Gazette. So if it's an exhibition, let's say if it's an international exhibition, it may not be notified in our Gazette of India over there. So that's actually a grey area. So as I said, you must always be safe rather than sorry over there. So if you have such urgencies, it's always wise to file a provisional application. The provisional applications can normally be filed within a gap of maybe within a week it can be done over there. Right? So I'll quickly run through this. Now this is something that's unique to the patent system, because I believe I have only 5 to 10 minutes. In the case of a journal article, unless your research work is completed, you cannot go for publication, isn't it? Can you go for publication with 50% of the work completed? Definitely not. This is something that's unique to the patent system, that you can still file a patent with a provisional specification, but provisional patents are not granted, but it gives you time, additional 12 months time, provided that you are working within the scope of what you have already disclosed in the provisional specification, right? So then that's one of the key benefits. So even if you have an idea, so 2 people are working on the same invention, so if one files first and the second one files later, so the one who is filing first will get a priority over there. So we call this as a first to file system, right? So even if, let's say, the second person had started working on that much before you started working, irrespective of that, the one who files first actually gets a priority, right? So that's one of the key factors over there. So as I mentioned earlier, once you file an application, you also have to place a request for examination. It's similar to your academic programs, wherein you have to pay the end semester examination fees every semester. Otherwise, you'll not be allowed to sit for the examination. I don't know over here, but in our university, it's not allowed. You don't pay the end semester fees. You're not allowed to sit for the examination. That's basically the fees for, let's say, I can go for post-grant opposition. This has to be filed within 1 year. And then you have to start paying the renewal or annuity fees. Now just moving on to foreign countries, let's say even if you want to protect your invention not just in India but also in other markets outside India, so you must be very much, you must be mindful of this particular factor, that you must file a corresponding application within 12 months. If you fail to do that, automatically you will lose priority of your invention even in foreign countries. Now similar to what we have discussed earlier, you have 2 modes by which you can file the patent application. You can directly file it within 12 months, or you can choose the international application filing mechanism. It's also known as your PCT. So it gives you additional 18 or 19 months, but ultimately you have to file. So if you're choosing option 2, you have to file the application twice. If you're choosing option 1, you have to only file it the second time directly into that foreign country. Then it follows the process of publication, examination and grant. Publication, examination and grant. This is the statutory fees which is associated with filing. So you have two categories of applicants and two modes of filing. So if you fall in the first category, the fees is, this is the minimum fees, 1600 and 4000. If you fall in the second category, the fees is 5 times higher. And for physical filing, the fees are normally 10% more than the online filing, because Patent Office normally encourages online filing. And this does not include the professional fees. Professional fees can be anywhere from, let's say, 50,000 to 1.52 lakhs, depending on the law firm that you are approaching over there, right? I'm talking about the entire cost, so please understand that the entire cost is not borne at the time of filing. So there are different stages, and the cost is also accordingly distributed. And so I'm just generally talking about the cost. So these are the factors that normally affect the duration of a patent grant, time which is taken to respond to various actions during filing, because the communications that happen between the client and the applicant over there, that actually also decides the time. So if once a search has been carried out, and after that what happens is, let's say if your invention is not patentable or it is lacking inventive step, so there is a possibility that the law firm will advise you on what should be done. So you may have to generate some data. So that can actually lead to delay in the filing of a patent application over there. So those, and second, field of technology. So normally the applications which are filed in the engineering domain take more time, because the number of applications are more in engineering domain when compared to medical and chemistry and life sciences over there. However, you have a remedy, fast track process. If you go for a fast track process, you can get a patent within 1 year. There also we have observed some exceptions. In QSAT we have seen that in the engineering domain it's taken more than 1 year, between 1 to 2 years. In biotechnology and all, we have got a patent in 7 months. Benefit of getting a patent granted earlier is, as I said earlier, you are deemed to be an owner. You are an owner of a patent only once it is granted. Just because you file a patent, you cannot go to the court of law and file an infringement suit. So if you have to file that someone is copying your invention without your permission, then a patent has to be granted in your name, right? So that's one of the benefits of fast tracking the process. Drawback, it is more costlier than the normal process. Like for example, the Tatkal ticket costs more than the normal or general ticket. So it's the same thing over here. So it comes at a price. And one of the other drawbacks is not everyone is eligible for availing the benefits of fast track. So there are certain categories of applicants, startups, MSMEs, education institutions, these are eligible for fast track. There are other categories as well. So normal process 2 to 5 years, provided that all the procedures are timely met. Otherwise, the patent can also take around 10 years to grant. There was one of the patents when I joined in QSAT, it took around 12 years to grant, because they were not aware of these timelines and procedures. So unless you meet the timelines, it may further delay the grant of a patent over there. So, moving on to this, do a search, right? If you are planning to purchase a property, do you make an outright purchase? Or do you carry out a background check of that particular property? Either you or maybe you may give that responsibility to a bank which is giving you a loan over there. Yes, someone would actually get it done. So it's no different over there. Why? Because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So you have spent so much time and money without doing a search, and if you're filing a patent, you'll realize that this invention was already existing in China. So all your money and time and resources that you invested will go waste over there. So it's always advisable to do a patentability search. Maybe you can delay the patentability search if you're filing a provisional, but at least before filing a complete, you must ensure that you do a patentability search. Disclose all the prior art patents and non-patent literature, because patents are pitched as a solution, a technical solution to a problem. So you have to identify what that problem is. And then you say that, my invention is a solution to that particular problem. Provide sufficient information, as I mentioned. If you're claiming a product, also disclose the process for making that particular product, right? Otherwise, that also can be a ground for denying a patent. And this is more of a practical purpose. I mean, what happens is, even in industry, what I have observed is that, let's say if a researcher is submitting his PhD and going, by the time he files a patent application, by the time there is an examination, we may not be able to contact the researcher. So if you have a lab notebook, then you can use that which with relevant to that particular invention in overcoming those objections which may have been raised during such examination over there. And please avoid these things, publication in any form, disclosing, to be on a safer side, even though we have a grace period in India. The grace period in India may not also be valid in other countries if you want to protect your invention in multiple countries, right? So finally, this, and yes, if it is very urgent, file a provisional patent application. Some of scholars approach us saying that we have a conference in 1 month or 2 months. So then we advise them that go for a provisional. So you get a priority and disclose whatever is there, whatever information you have in hand. And then later on complete it and add that information at the time of filing it complete. So I believe I'm almost done. This just one more slide after this. So if you are involved in collaborative research, enter into a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement before disclosing invention to a third party. And if it results in any sort of IPR, could be patents or could be joint publication, enter into an agreement before commencement of the project. And if such project is also leading to commercialization, so before commercialization, decide on how you are going to share the benefits which is going to arise from commercialization of such project. And these are the resources. So one of the benefits of these resources are free, unlike your journal databases. All you need to do is you need to have a laptop or a mobile phone and an active internet connection, right? And ESpaceNet is basically European Patent Office's database. This is the one which we normally recommend because it covers the patent literature of around 100 plus countries over there. And the other benefit is it also provides a translation of these foreign language patent documents over there. Right? USPTO is exclusively covering the US patents. INPAS is the Indian Patent Office's database, which covers only the Indian patents over there. And WIPO Patent Scope is basically the World Intellectual Property Organization, the governing body, and they have a database. It's also comprehensive, but it is third-party databases. For example, Google Patents, Free Patents Online. So these are some of the online databases that you can refer to check whether your subject matter has been disclosed anywhere or not. But yes, that's also, I would say, subject of a separate talk on how you can read a patent document, because there are certain complexities involved in going through a patent document, unlike a journal article. Right? So for example, if you want to check, just check the abstract and just check the experimental part. Don't go into the claims if you're doing it for the first time. Right? So that's just a general advice over there. Yeah, I believe I'm done. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you, sir, for your session. Due to positive time, we'll be winding up the quest session as of now. And in case you have any queries, you can approach me and I will route the queries to sir. We would like to invite our director, Dr. George Chandy, to please felicitate the guest.
Dr. Rathish, that was a whole new world for us. But thank you so much. You're obviously very, very learned in the field, and this is something that we've been struggling with. So thank you so much for coming over and enlightening us. And we'd like to have, is it an MOU or is it a, because there are a lot of people here with ideas, and we want to patent them and we want your advice on it. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much, and I'll request Dr. Jaunwali to please come and honor our guest. And shall we put our hands together and say thank you very much? I can see Ria, Matthew, Sumit, all very happy because lots of things are going to happen. Elvin, thank you so much for bringing Dr. Rathish into our midst. Thank you, sir. I just met a wonderful lady recently. Her name is Dr. Remita. She's amongst the toppers in the state. She studied in Toronto Medical College for her MBBS and for her MD, and has now come as a cardiologist from Lissy Hospital. Remita, are you here? continue to be impressed by you as Ravicharian and Leena and all of them. So welcome into our family. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming.